Before we get started about this amazing film, I just want to say that as a human being, I'm extremely grateful for you doing this work. And as a man, I am horrified, outraged, and ashamed. I have to say. I wish I could say that I was surprised. Sadly, I'm not surprised, but it's just absolutely horrifying what happened here. I think it's a brilliant film. It's brilliantly put together, and I want to go first to your history with this project. What got you interested in making the film, and trace the background for us a little bit before we get into how you went about it.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon in the 1970s, and my mom had a desk next to her bed where she would keep the things that she didn't want me to see. And of course, that's exactly where I would go rooting around. And when I was about 12 years old, I found the Height Report. And it just kind of plunged me into this world of female sexuality, that I was on the cusp of entering into in a number of years. And yet I was getting very, very little information about that. So I was amazed and comforted to be suddenly a part of this sort of circle of thousands of women all over the country talking about what they were really feeling and what was going on. And I thought about it so much throughout the rest of my life because it made things less scary. It made things more fun, to know that there was this just enormous diversity of female sexual experience. So I was very thankful to Cher Height. And then I read her obituary in 2020, and the headline was, Cher Height, she explained how women orgasm, and she was hated for it. And it just really stopped me in my tracks. I just wanted to know, why did people hate her? Of course, I could imagine the answer was sort of the patriarchy, but I wanted to know more about it. I wanted to know, how did she do that work, and who was she? And there was this picture of her, and she's such a glamorous, enigmatic figure, which also surprised me. So I did just this huge go down the rabbit hole deep dive. And then I found my way to some producers who were in their 30s who had been asking themselves the same questions. And we embarked on this project.
And so you were already a filmmaker when you read her obituary?
Oh, yes. I've been a filmmaker for 30 years.
Okay.
And the obituary I read during COVID, just after completing my last project, which was Crip Camp.
Okay. Okay, right, exactly. So I did know that, but so when you did the deep dive, you got the producers together, and now it's a huge project. So a lot of stock footage. Did you decide on Dakota Johnson to do the over voicing early on? Did that come early?
Yeah. So the producers that I was referencing were NBC News Studios originally, and then we teamed up with an amazing company led by Elise Pearlstein and RJ Cutler out in California called This Machine. But NBC came to the table with a bunch of footage because one of the first producers there on the project who had the idea on her end, Erica Fink, had gone into the NBC archive and just unearthed this incredible treasure trove of material, as though, it was some massive celebrity that she was typing into the database. And that was the thing that made her say, oh, there's something going on here. How can it be that I, as a young woman, have been studying women's studies in college and have never heard of this person? So we then discovered that her archive had been acquired by the Schlesinger Library at Harvard, and that was an incredible treasure trove of material. And we started reaching out to her friends, and a lot of them were photographers and artists, and they had material. So we knew there was a massive amount of material to tell the story. And as we discovered, the Harvard archive had a lot of these very contemporaneous, very intimate writings by Cher. At the moment that various things had happened in her life, she was trying to process them and think about them and write about them, be it the early modeling days or the backlash from the media or her thoughts as she was writing the book. So we knew we could construct a very intimate kind of blow by blow, sense of what was going on in her brilliant mind as these things were happening. And that's what led us to Dakota Johnson, because we wanted the sort of core personality or character of Cher in the film, the center of it, to be this sort of Cher as she was embarking in this project in her 30s, in the full throes of the feminist movement and having fun and being creative and all of that. And so someone of Dakota's age seemed right. and also she's an incredible actress who really can harness sort of femininity and strength in a really compelling way. And also she really cares about female sexual health and wellness and is very outspoken on that. And actually is a co-creative director of an intimacy product company called Mod. So I thought she might be interested. And of course she called me right back and said, I love Cher Haight. I already know who she is. I'm familiar with her. You know, I would go have dinner with her tomorrow if I could. And I really want to be involved. So it was really a dream to work with her.
Well, and it seems like a fit made in the universe because not only do her interests align, but the vocal characteristics align perfectly with the actual footage or the audio of Cher herself and Dakota. It seemed like a perfect fit, and the acting, as you say, was perfect to sort of immerse herself in that personality. When you looked at the story and you structured it, I was interested to see that you went to her background, her childhood, but not until after the male backlash started, or that it gained momentum. It was gaining momentum at that point, and then you went to that. Was that a conscious choice as to sort of look at her origin story? Because you went back to more origin about her sexuality at the very end, but that beginning part, when the pictures of her as a child, and then getting about her not being wanted and so forth, did you put it in that part of the film specifically for that reason? I mean, what was your thinking about that?
From the beginning, Eileen Meyer, the editor, and I really felt strongly that we didn't want to put her backstory, childhood backstory, which, as you just saw, is very, arresting and poignant and horrible, to be abandoned by your parents like that at the beginning. Because I think that one way that women who do great things are often treated in biographies and biographical movies, as opposed to men who do great things, is that they're sort of pathologized by their childhood backstory. And one way that one could look at this movie was to say, well, look what happened to her in her childhood. That's why she was interested in sexuality. That's why she was interested in, love and finding connection in ways that, that weren't intimate with another person or blah, blah, blah. You could do a whole film that was really a psychoanalysis of Cher Haight. And I was not very interested in sort of scrutinizing her the way the media had, in my film. I think we wanted very much to let her be the storyteller, and we wanted people to meet her the way we thought she would have wanted them to meet her, which was with her brains and her work and the things that she was accomplishing. And then, of course, it is important as you get to know her, almost as though you were a friend coming to know her. And then she finally tells you a little bit of the story, and you kind of are putting the pieces together. But it was that kind of intimate thing, like you've become a friend of hers and those things are being revealed when she would have wanted them to be revealed. That was the idea. And the other idea was to work towards Cher herself becoming one of her own survey respondents in a way with that final story about her own sexuality. How would she have answered her own survey? Because really this is a story about Cher Haight, but it's also just a story about women and how all of us have had that moment of, kind of discovering our sexuality and then almost immediately being forced to feel shame and confusion about it,
Yeah, no, I thought it was incredible because, as you say, it often gets pathologized from the jump, and this was wonderful to show how she created herself from the very beginning when she arrived in New York and she had no money and she was being a model, but she was so aware of what it meant to be the model. She was the way she wrote about it, the way she talked about it, and as she did create herself, and it's great to see her create herself in real time, almost, and then keep creating herself, and the joy in which she found her creation, and when it was received well, and then when the reaction came out, the effect on her was just so horrifying, and just not believable. I mean, it is unbelievable and horrible. Let's see about this. Oh, so you had all that stock footage from the NBC studios and other places. I mean, you got a lot of stuff from the photographer that came up later in her life that made those beautiful photos in the last part of the film. How did that come about?
Well, there are several photographers or people who knew her whose photographs we used in the film. So Mike Wilson, who took the early modeling pictures, and we got a lot of amazing photographs from him. James Hamilton, who's a legendary photographer, worked for the Village Voice for a long time. There's a whole film about him that's just come out, actually. He's amazing. And then Ira Sprash, I think you're referencing,
Right.
whom Cher collaborated with on those incredible photographs of her in Paris later in her life. And we actually we had heard that Cher had a friend who was a photographer, and we knew that we'd seen a picture or two in previous publications, which were very arresting. And we learned that she was having a requiem for Cher at the very beginning of the project, before we even had found financing for the project or really had begun shooting. And it was going to be on the first anniversary of her cremation. And it was going to be a kind of spiritual ceremony in Iris's apartment. And she was curating kind of an exhibit of her photographs in her studio in Paris. So that was our first shoot. And it was kind of incredible because it was almost a seance to conjure back Cher's spirit in Paris. And we were plunged in this incredible studio Iris has, where she's really kind of created another world almost that's very imbued with Cher's aesthetic, this very hyper feminine aesthetic that they share together. So it was kind of this mysterious and highly cinematic and very aesthetic way to come to know Cher Height. And I think it really guided a lot of the rest of the filmmaking, And then of course our interest in the film and everything, kind of pushed Iris to go back to her father's house in Germany and start finding more and more photos. And she's still actually unearthing like incredible photos that she and Cher created together. And that part of the story became very important to me because I didn't want to leave her hanging. I didn't want this to just be a tragedy. I think there's so many examples of strength and of perseverance and of actually persevering to try to create a better, more equitable world and share a story. And I felt that her kind of, returning to that sort of self-creation of her image in a really healing, really revolutionary way was important to have at the end of the film.
No, amazing resilience from childhood, beyond childhood, just amazing resilience over and over and over again. When she, she dared to go to men after going to women, and that was enough of a threat to men when she revealed what women wanted to do and women's sexuality. But then it was addressing men directly, and I couldn't believe. I mean, it was beautifully handled the way you talked about the backlash from going to Judge Clarence Thomas to an incredible show to me. And I mean, I knew about the Height report when it came out. I didn't know what happened with the backlash. I wasn't following it at that time. And it's really great that you reveal that now, and it's so in line with what's happening now, unfortunately, again and again and again. But you have a show that I never even heard of, which is Leave It to the Women, which is populated by 4 men of the worst troglodytic mindset I've ever seen. So, I mean, where did you come across that? I mean, it just...
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I mean, basically, the person we have to thank for that is Cher Height herself, because she would make arrangements when she went on a show that they had to give her a VHS copy or she wouldn't go on. And so she saved those, and they were in the Harvard archive, and we had them digitized. And I just could not believe that show when I watched it. I came out of it, I felt like I had been in some kind of wrestling match for 2 hours, and I was like scarred and disturbed, and it really was just such a visceral thing. And normally the show actually had women on the panel, but for this special case, they felt like men needed to have their say too. It couldn't just be women facing off against Cher, it had to be men too. So they did an hour of women, and then they brought in and did an hour of men, and so. Yeah, I felt we came to see that almost as like a showdown in a Western film or something, that scene. And it was a really powerful way to kind of, almost visualize the David and Goliath aspect of the story immersively. Like you are one person facing off against patriarchy writ large. And here she was kind of carrying, in this case, not the kind of inner lives of women even, but the inner lives of men themselves. And even that was so threatening.
No, we can't talk about that. We cannot ever talk about that. We cannot acknowledge any of that. And I don't know anyone who's ever done anything like that. Oh my God.
I don't know anyone who's ever had a feeling. But, I have young men coming up to me all the time and saying, A, they're shocked by how terrible that was, but B, they still think this is a huge issue, that's really undiscussed. So I really am hoping that the film is going to kind of dust off some sort of rusty conversations that people were willing to have back then, but are really less willing to have now, I think.
Well, it's incredible. I mean, shame on the Harvard student from 1981. I mean, grateful to the Harvard Archives, but I mean, really, to talk about the frilly green thing she was wearing? I mean, that's a Harvard student? Oh my God. And then you say it's facing off against men in general. Then it's on Oprah. It's an entirely male audience. I mean, what was the story behind that? I mean, that's not even like Oprah to do that to a person.
It's actually a similar story. My understanding is that they had had a show and women had spoken and men were so angry. They were so angry that they sort of decided the only thing we can do is channel all of this, anger and give men their own show. So they sent every guy a book. Obviously, a lot of them didn't read it. But, I think that was a time in our media when we were really turning towards that kind of gotcha television, and also media was consolidating. And so somebody like Cher became, a valuable sort of punching bag that these shows could kind of pass around, and everybody was trying to come up with their own way to, create stunt television out of her. And she herself wrote about that later in her life. She said, looking back, that became a whole thing. And of course, we still see that playing out in social media in so many ways today, but she felt that she had been one of the first victims of that kind of media culture. I don't know if that's true, but that was her own perception.
Well, it certainly looks like that. And I think the fact that she called out Maury Povich for his bait and switch on her, which she was reviled for, and then she would walk out in interviews because people would try and set her up, and then they couldn't believe it when she's going to walk out, and then it's like shows she's difficult. But he completely lied to her. He said, you can come on, and we're not going to talk about anything except this. And then he brings in the chauffeur driver. So, I mean, the limousine driver. So the fact that she called him out, I think, was so brave. And you just mentioned dusting off some of these old conversations. She was a revolutionary from the very jump. And then she found her tribe. And I love the way that you showed her finding her tribe in New York and getting connected to Now and the rest of those people. And as you told this whole story, the way it unfolded was beautifully structured. But I don't think dusting off is the right word. I think that she was doing such groundbreaking work, and then it got devolved into, it's not scientific because we have to suppress it. I mean, the fact that the sales force said we can't have more than 4,000 advanced sales, right from the jump, just trying to shut her down. And she did such groundbreaking work and was reviled for it, but there's every reason why she shouldn't be disappeared and why this film should go farther. Where do you go from here with this film?
Well, it's in theaters now, and it's in theaters kind of in quite a number of cities around the country, and then it will be streaming sometime early next year. It's going to be in foreign territories next year, including in theaters in London in January. So, and we're starting to plan taking it to college campuses around the country, and I'm excited about where it can go. I feel like she's a pretty powerful figure, and the word about her is spreading. So, but yeah, I mean, when I say dusting off conversations, I think what I'm talking about is the conversations that people were having in consciousness raising groups and of women, but also so many men who wanted to be a part of that conversation too, and one thing that was super important to me was to make a film that really disabused people of the idea that Cher had been some kind of man-hater or male basher, and the extent to which that she really saw that the patriarchy was oppressing men too and wanted to liberate all of us from that. So those are the conversations I think we have a hard time still having in the media or even in private, but I'm hoping the film can reinstigate.
Well, I think it can, and it's gotten an amazing critical response so far. I mean, the two things that I have quotes of from Variety, that's a astonishing, beautifully made corrective to the cultural amnesia that has surrounded her, from the Variety review and the Washington Post review. And Washington Post was complicit in that horrible disabusing the world of the science of her thing. But now the Washington Post reviewer is saying, as regrettable as Haidt's fate was, the disappearance of Cher Haidt goes a long way towards rectifying the wrongs done to her, which, I mean, I wish they could be undone, but that she braved it for all of us, and that you brought this to our attention. I think we all have to be incredibly grateful. We don't have a lot of time left, and I know you can't hear the audience, but I can relay a question to you if you like. Oh, there's a mic. Will it be hearable for Nicole? Please, anybody have a question? Who? I can't see. Okay. Well, then that's okay then. We don't have a question.
Hello?
Oh, wait,
Hello?
there it is.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Well, two things. You see, she seems to have stopped in 1995. She moves to Germany. Your film didn't. What happened to her? What in the last 10 years of her life or 20 years of her life, we don't get a picture, and I really want to know. The other thing is, why the hell did she do all those crazy-ass media appearances where she was going to be attacked, and it was a part of her self-promotion and the promotion of her book? So it's kind of two questions.
Yeah. In terms of why she went on the media shows, I mean, I feel 100% convinced from everything I've read that she wrote, which is a lot, that it was really to get her message across. You know, I think it's important to think back to that time and what women were subjected to in general if they wanted to have a platform and speak out, you know. And I think there was much more of an acceptance that you had to put up with a lot of crap if you were going to try to do that at that time. And she was brave, you know, she wanted to get the word out there. You can see her even in that Maury Povich show saying, I would like to talk to the women in the audience. You know, she's just always reaching out in this belief that if her message gets out, it's going to change people. And she kept doing that when she went to Europe. You know, she kept being on shows, she kept writing, she continued to write books. As you saw in that 94 piece in London, she'd already written and published 3 things since leaving the States. At that point, she was on Colbert in 2004. That was with a compendium of her work that she managed to get republished in the States. She eventually got a rare neurodegenerative disease, and she spent, I think it was about the last 7 years of her life, you know, being very sick. But she divorced Friedrich, the husband that you met in the film. She married another man towards the end of her life. She really enjoyed friends and living in various European cities. And she got an award right as she was getting kind of too sick to, you know, appear in public anymore. And she was asked, you know, to speak about things. And it was apparently, a friend of hers told me this, it was hard for her to speak, but she did say, I would do it all over again, which I thought was beautiful and made me feel good to know. So, yeah. Yeah,
her courage was unbelievable because she did have the target painted on her back, and she went on those shows in some ways to show us how unfair the treatment of her would be. It almost seemed as if she was ready to say, okay, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to face an audience of all men. I'm going to face this Leave It to Women that's all men. So I can show you exactly what's going on with men in this country. And America, you know, comes across as the most unevolved male population in the world, but and so you can't blame her for renouncing her citizenship, I would say. But
look at all those wonderful men in the movie, you know? Well, I mean, she had great taste in men. Every single man we spoke with about her who had been a part of her world and her work was just such a evolved, lovely human being. And that became very important to me, you know, to counterbalance all the toxicity.
Well, and there is hope there. Just one curious question. In 2006, she's on Colbert. Was there anything surrounding that? Any sort of reanimating of people's awareness of her and so forth? I mean, what was that about?
I mean, she was putting out a book called The Haidt Reader, which was this compendium of her books, and she was publicizing that. And I didn't see much other press around that in the U.S. And I think Colbert has, you know, been a real supporter of feminists and feminism, and I applaud him for, having her on.
Absolutely.
At that point in time when really her reputation was still so kind of in tatters in the US that she wasn't able to get much otherwise.
No, well, I think that in addition to the whole Cher Heights story, the story of that reaction to her and about feminism and what's going on now, and as you say, there's these conversations, the consciousness raising that needs to be brought back. I think just so grateful for you bringing this to light and bringing it to all of us. So we just more cheering. I hope you can hear the cheering. Thank you very much.